Okay, let me do a sound check. Sounds good, sounds good. Here we are again, and it is 2 o'clock on a Thursday, and you know what that means. That means it is my Fairy with Teeth novel narration time. It's me, your host, your Flower Kisma, yours truly, and I just want to share with you where I'm at. I'm at the Haven of the Five Companions, another one of my homes in Elder Scrolls Online, and this is open to the home tours for anybody who wants to visit it. It's called They Come, and that means, of course, the Five Companions. All right, so let's see. This is my entrance, and we got the beautiful Mirabelle. Okay, so let's see what's up here. This is my little marketplace up there. No, let me find another place to sit. Oh, yes, we can go up here and sit. This is really pretty. It's a good location. And this is designed for a romantic dinner between you and a friend. But I'm going to just go up here. Let's see, how do I make myself disappear again? Let me think. There we go. All right, have a nice view while I begin reading. And let's see, we ended in the middle of a chapter. And so the chapter that we are continuing on, I don't know, I don't have chapter numbers in this book, but we ended at towards the bottom of page 133. So that's where I'm going to continue reading. And if you remember, Kian and Vivian are talking about the Watchers. And Kian is getting ready to also inform Vivian about. Well, they're getting ready to bring the pilgrims into the alcove, into the cairn, and she's going to do her mock teaching on the calendar stone. Hmm. Vivian positioned herself next to the pillar stone, a support and security to hold her and protect her for the brief time Kian would be outside, or so Kian thought as he turned and made his way down the passage tunnel. One by one the pilgrims entered, oohing and awing over the magnificent circle. The small group gathered before the basin stone and sat on the ground in view of the calendar stone. Kian positioned himself across from Vivian, who stood with her back to the pillar stone, eyes closed. She still didn't look right. The color hadn't completely come back to her cheeks. He cleared his throat, which brought her eyes to him. Realizing that the pilgrims were waiting on her, Vivian looked up and looked upon the expectant faces: Rose, Shelby, Ken, Ellen, Carla, and Mark. She stepped away from the pillar stone to face them, her movements stiff and awkward. "You are all welcome," she said, her voice not quite normal sounding. Kian could see that Vivian was still trembling. Her normally bright eyes seemed dull, red-rimmed. Upon his perusal of her condition, Vivian suddenly stepped back against the pillar stone. He leaned against the stone he stood near and watched her like a hawk, concern visible on his face. He could only wait for her next move, for her to begin the lesson she had ready. The air was filled with moisture. The earth seemed to gently vibrate. And when the pillar stone began to hum, only Vivian felt it. She closed her eyes, focusing on the gentle radiation moving through her back. A sense of deep quiet flowed through her, one that transcended time. Life was gentle again. Vivian's body began to hum like a tuning fork. She fancied that her limed hair stood on end and that light shot out in all directions. Kian watched a plethora of expressions wax and wane across Vivian's face, instinctively knowing that something was happening to her. He could feel it, taste it, almost smell it. Preparing to go to her, he stopped as Vivian's eyes popped opened. To Vivian, the light inside the cairn shifted. Part of the calendar stone now seemed highlighted. The time had come for her to speak, and if she didn't, they would think something was wrong, or worse, become scared and edgy. She took a few attempts before her voice flowed through her throat and backed her moving lips. Finally, she heard herself say, "Time is essential only with respect to the manipulation of space." She stood with eyes transfixed on the stone. It swirls around us in spirals. We exist here, in this spiraling. Vivian pointed to a position on the calendar. Most of you operate on this level, but can, with little effort, bend this spoke here. In doing so, time as you know it slows down as you accelerate. And this acceleration will propel you into this spiral. Again, she pointed to the stone. When this rate of vibration has been achieved, it becomes possible to slip through the gap between these two spokes into this spiral. The area left behind slows or perhaps appears to be moving into slow motion. As Vivian reached forward and touched the calendar a third time, she jerked her face toward Kian. Their eyes met. Fear registered in hers. Kian stepped away from the wall as Vivian whirled around to face the pilgrims. I, she stammered, glancing back to him. She was completely frazzled. Where had she gone? Vivian stepped behind the pillar as if using it to shield her body. Kian immediately took over. "I hope you all realize what just happened," he began. "When Vivian first entered this cairn," he paused. "May I tell them?" he asked Vivian. She nodded. "When Vivian entered this cairn, she was greeted by a watcher. This same watcher is apparently speaking through her to us on time." Vivian closed her eyes and listened to Kian's smooth voice as he recounted the autumnal equinox story. But by the time he finished and answered a few questions, she felt better. She stepped from behind the stone, all eyes focusing on her. "This wasn't what I planned," Vivian spoke softly, pushing the hair from her eyes. You were all going to get a mock lesson on the ancient bardic system of the calendar, on cosmology." She laughed. "But I guess they had other plans." "Oh my God!" shrieked Ken. His face went ashen. "What was that?" Vivian and Kian rushed to his side. I felt something go right through me, he claimed, eyes wide. The others jumped up, bumping against each other. Mark and Marcella rushed out of the cairn into the safety of the sunlight. Once outside, they turned to each other, offered tentative smiles, and stood silently looking at the passage. "Wow," whispered Mark, running his fingers through his hair. "This is getting intense." "Yeah," mumbled Marcella. Neither of them made a move to re-enter. Faery-Chronicles entry 1.888.4 before. The power of the other world was forceful in presenting itself that day. A test had been given and taken while we fairy watched and waited, wondering if Vivian had passed. Only Mocka could give the verdict. The watcher had stepped back between the spoke, passing through kin, retreating into the other world until curiosity would pull him earthside again. To Vivian, the stones had already spoken. The secret encoded messages the stones held had imprinted her soul. She was now filled with new information that might take years for her to process and come to consciously understand. Mocka stood in observation, not yet feeling confident that her team was strong enough to endure the trial that lay ahead. Lou had already pulled farther back into the mists when he realized that the power of Cian, of Macul, was not awakened, but that Macul was overtaken Banba. He departed when accepting that the love between Macul and Banba was still strong and earthbound, and that as long as Macul walked in physical form in the same lifetime as Banba, that he did not stand a chance winning her heart over to his love. Believing his usefulness complete, Lou had stood upon the hill to gaze upon Vivian's mortal form one last time before withdrawn into the mists. I feared that we had once again interfered with mortals, manipulating them, rearranging them, twisting them, and spoiling them to return completely to their human condition. I knew that Cian did not know himself as Macul, nor remotely recognize Vivian as Banba, but I was only to witness and record and do nothing more. Shocked and enveloped in fear, the group of mortals practically ran down the hill, running for the white coach that sat glistening in the sun below, outlined by the blackness of the asphalt as if it were a cocoon of safety. Cian walked down the hill in a complete daze, a silly grin on his face. Ellen clung tightly to his right arm. "Are you all right?" she repeatedly asked, to which Cian would give her a silly grin in answer. Catching sight of Vivian, Cian pulled his arm free of Ellen and headed for her. Cian saw Cian's approach and intentionally lagged behind Vivian, falling in next to Marcella and Mark. "What has happened to me?" Cian asked Vivian, his eyes wide like calf eyes, startled at the slightest sound or movement. "You've been touched by the other world, Cian." Cian grinned, satisfied with her response. He wasn't sure whether Cian was faking it or not, half suspecting the man was, but reconsidering after the color drained from Cian's face and how badly Cian was shaking when he helped him to his feet. Silence wove around the group as they continued their trek back to the bus, each lost in his or her own thoughts. At first, Joe and Steve paid little attention to them as they returned. They paid little attention to Rose and Vivian and Carla when they climbed aboard the bus and found their seats. But by the time everyone began eating lunch, the two men started to notice how silent and distant they seemed. Rose was very quiet and withdrawn. She slouched down in her seat, fighting to hold back the tears that threatened to spill, wondering why she had not been picked by the fairy like Cian. Carla sat quietly beside Vivian. When she offered a sandwich to Vivian, who shook her head in refusal, Carla ate the sandwich in silence before heading outside. Marcella and Mark spent lunch together outside the bus, joking and talking nonchalantly about anything except what had happened up on the hill. Shelby stood by herself near the back of the bus. Kat and Donna approached her and in hushed whispers asked what had happened, it being obvious that something had. At first, Shelby tried to tell them what had actually transpired, then gave up, admitting that she didn't fully understand herself. Donna felt very disappointed that she had missed whatever it was that had happened, but wouldn't dare say anything to anyone. After all, she had made the decision not to go that morning over breakfast. Disappointed and angry, blaming herself and everyone else, she made her way back into the bus and took her seat. She could feel a mood come on. Kat, on the other hand, shrugged it off and joined Marcella and Mark for a good chat. Cian stood aloof, a cigarette dangling from his lips, his focus still on Cranebane West, the tip of the cairn just visible from where he stood. There was so much more that he needed to tell Vivian and trust into her keeping. He sat down on a granite stone, suddenly feeling that Vivian was the confidant he had never had. He laughed at himself and bolted to attention when he realized Carla was standing over him. "How's she doing?" he asked. Carla removed an envelope from her pocket and sat down next to Cian. "Fine," she said, staring at the creamy white paper in her hands. Look, Vivian was wondering if you'd take this back to the Hill of Ishnock and give it to the bard." "Right now?" Cian asked, disturbed. "No, of course not." Carla shook her head, avoiding eye contact. "After the pilgrimage is over." She held out the envelope and watched as Cian's long, slender fingers, with their long, dirty nails, took the envelope. "Thanks," she said, standing, then hesitating, added, "By the way, Vivian wanted me to tell you that she doesn't really want to talk about it, okay?" "Right," Cian replied, and watched Carla waddle back to the bus. Without looking at the envelope, he rubbed the grain of the paper between his fingers, fine linen paper, expensive paper, and wondered what on earth Vivian could have written to the bard. Cian pushed the envelope into the side pocket of his jeans. He'll deal with it later. "All aboard!" Joe's voice called out over a loudspeaker. "It's time to hit the road. Next stop, Loch Gur." Joe's silly face, wearing a silly grin, appeared out the front window. "Well, what you think of that?" he asked Cian. "Now you and Vivian have a speaker system?" "That's grand, Joe," Cian said. He stood and made his way to the bus, feeling exhausted. All right. Hey, that is our first chapter. Well, it's not our first chapter. It's the end of last week's last chapter, but this week's first chapter. We're in the middle of the book now, so things are really heating up and getting crazy and all that good stuff. I'm just moving to another location. And let's see, I don't know where I'll go. Where shall I go? Oh no. I'm going back the other way. Sorry. All right, I'm looking at the chat to see if there are any questions. And they aren't. I want to thank those of you who have been watching, even if you are very quiet right now. It's okay to be quiet. We've already been looking at a cool scene out there. Oh my God, am I like making you dizzy? I'm making myself dizzy. I know where I'll take you. I will take you to a fun little garden. How's that? Yep. with chickens and hens and roosters and all kinds of food planted for eating pleasure. We'll just stand over here and that way we can watch those little funny chickens. Okay. Yep, I farm. Okay. So let's keep moving forward, shall we? Page 140. Spinning Wheels of Chance. The white coach headed south on the N6, a fairly large thoroughfare in good condition. With each mile, distance was put between the mortals and the hill of Ishnock and Loch Crew. This also meant that a separation grew between Vivian and the bard, but rather than dwell on it, her attention turned to the fact they were leaving County Meath, Cian's home territory. With this reality came a sweeter one. The tour was officially on the road. Cian would no longer go home each night. He would be staying with them in the same B&B for the remainder of the pilgrimage. In Loch Gur, the group would be divided between two B&Bs. All of the pilgrims except Donna would stay in a quaint B&B located only 100 feet from the loch, while Vivian, Cian, Joe, Carla, and Donna would stay at a farmhouse about 15 kilometers east. "You'll love this place," Cian said as the bus bumped along. "There's a fairy mound directly behind the house. You'll love the owners. Claire's really curious about what we do, and Michael, well, he's brilliant." Vivian listened, happy for the distraction from the morning events. Their thighs touched. She looked down at Cian's long legs, the worn black jeans, at the way his hands lay folded in his lap, at their smoothness. She looked at her own hands. Funny how they had not discussed the bard. In fact, Cian had never even questioned her about the walk. She sighed and looked out the window. It didn't matter. Besides, it was just as well. Now she knew who he was, who she was. She was beginning to understand. "Pothole!" Joe warned. The bus lurched. Cian and Vivian smashed together. An involuntary smile spread across Vivian's face. She felt the heat rise into her cheeks, every inch of her glowing on fire, a crystal shining with new-born desire. She laughed and looked fully at Cian, who noticeably tensed under the stare. The lust dripped from his eyes as he laughed with her. Oh, yes. Cian wanted Vivian, too. At times it was almost unbearable. He could feel the guilt trickle through his body. He clenched his fingers around his thumbs, placed both hands between his knees, desperately searching for a greater sense of security or control. He didn't want to give Vivian the wrong impression, didn't want to mess things up. I mean, what if he did or said something to offend her? Vivian flashed her green eyes on him, her lips curved in the most delicious smile. Her laughter rippled. Even in the state she was now in, Vivian was irresistible. Maybe even more. A shy vulnerability peeked from behind her sorrow-tinged eyes, and Cian liked the way it made him feel. Her protector. Yes, he must protect her. She wasn't as strong as she pretended to be, just a beautiful little priestess, powerful and vulnerable. A shudder passed through him. Cian turned away from Vivian, forcing himself to look out the front window. Cian withdrew. Vivian studied Cian's profile, thinking how much he looked like a young Sean Connery, but with long brown hair and much fuller lips. Cian scooted to the edge of his seat. "Best go back and entertain the Ricks," he said. "Feels a bit tense back there." He got up and stood in the aisle, holding on to the seat back. He looked down at Vivian as if waiting for her approval. What could she say to that? Nothing. All she could do was smile and nod, turn her head and look out the window, focus on the beautiful scenery, feed her soul with it, because in a short period of time she'd have to leave this behind and return to California. Joe pushed a tape into the tape deck. The hypnotic chords of a harpsichord filled the coach, followed by the lyrical baritone of Brendan Perry. Farewell now, my sister. Up ahead there lies your road, and your conscience walks beside you. It's the best friend you will ever know. Surely he was singing to her. Vivian felt this had to be so. Knew it was so as her body tensed, as the song's message penetrated her awareness. Each word a pinch, a plunging of hard, still truth into her heart, as if it were the soil of a field prepared for crop. But this truth was not followed with the planting of a seed, only a forbidden overshadowing of fear. It was not Kian Vivian feared, but the unknown forces behind him and her, those forces that seemed to be pulling the strings. And the past is now your future. It bears witness to your soul. Make sure that the love you offer up does not fall on barren soil. Vivian also feared that which she thought couldn't pass between them, love, more enduring than the hills of passion, of the spirit, of deathless things. She feared such things because they seemed so very present. She feared what she felt. Kian was not only her priest, but also a man, dare she admit, a soulmate. And she felt at that moment so willing to give to him the inward, unnameable life of her fantasy, as well as the emotion that dwelled in her heart and in her mind, that emotion that pulsed uncontrollably through her blood and left her nerves tingling. And the voice warned her then to take heed of such fantasy. For the wind cries of late in the whispering grass, our way of life is held in the spinning wheels of chance. The fear of Vivian's emotion blinded her, broadsided her, attacking her with the ruthless abandon of a child at play. How could she tell what she was to him when he spoke to her? It was with hidden meaning. How could she know when his actions would suddenly contradict such meanings? Vivian wanted to believe that she was a flame to Kian's mind as well as to his life, but he could not tell her what words failed to tell. Vivian could feel her heartbeat, her pulse rise to his eyes as a wave to the moon. And in those eyes of his, Vivian had thought, surely she saw that which was in her own heart, but to which she had instantly fallen blind to, and felt he must lead her as if she were blindfolded. Surely she would not be expected to look upon that which was intolerable, for what if she misread the emotion that she thought she saw rise to his eyes? The same battle rage within Kian? Doubtless it was so, but this she could not know. Vivian knew her own heart because of the untranslatable call that was there. She heard it in those silences where women listen. She had heard it when she once listened to the voice of her husband, and in the silence of Lou. And even as the lovely, tranquil Irish landscape rolled on for miles, or the perfectly formed circle of oaks groved on distant hills, or the soft gurgle of a stream that seemed to call out their names, Vivian felt their souls dance together. She turned in her seat to look at Kian among the others, wondering if he did not think this himself. and the fear crept back behind her eyes as he glanced her way, meeting her stare, a soft smile edging his lips as he paused in mid-sentence. He was very attractive, someone whom she wouldn't choose for herself, but the soul had chosen him, had known him, and this she also feared. She did not fear with her mind that seemed to leap as a doe to the water springs. She did not fear with her body for that abhorred death and the ending of dreams. Yet something in her feared. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was the contradiction she now found within herself, the easiness to love two men at the same time. Yet Vivian believed in the beloved, a love which spoke of love as a granite rock and of the unchanging stars, love that is a moving tide, a mystery that is forever, and whispers so much, telling so little. Vivian believed in her love for her husband. In her contradiction, how could Vivian know what it truly was she feared? She was too confused, mentally dredging up any gunk that would support her argument against feeling what she felt. Vivian was her own judge and jury, mixed into one mind and one heart belonging to the same person. How could she possibly know? Do you feel this? Do you share this same secret? Vivian wanted to scream those words at Kian, unconcerned with who heard, knowing only that his eyes would be on her, that his ears would hear her words, that his heart would deliver its truth by replying, and at last she would know, and the torment would be ended. Kian was the keeper of secrets, beseeching her to entrust their secret into his keeping long before the secret had become a reality, to nurture it the way a dove sits hours on end over the nest eggs. Surely she was becoming an obsessed, raving lunatic, for Vivian heard Kian's reply whispered in her ear. The sweet thoughts that he carried inside vibrated within her. She heard his words that were her own. Vivian swung back around in her seat, tightly wrapping her arms around her stomach, the ache inside real and relentless. "You idiot!" she hissed to herself. "Get a hold of yourself, you stupid fucking idiot." Okay. That's another chapter. Torture, huh? Well, it is what it is. Let's see, where shall we go now while I read the next chapter? I guess we'll go to this little area right here. Yeah, we'll go to this area right here and maybe look at some of the wonderful goodies we can eat. Oh, look at a cake. Oh, how pretty. Okay. Let's see. Let me do a time check. Oh, we've got time for maybe 2 chapters this week. Oh, I wanted to look at something real quick. Oh yes, I thought that I had a message come in about claiming my prizes for the week. All right, let's continue. Page 145. A flurry of welcome. Loch Gur was a small horseshoe lake set among limestone hills located approximately 20 kilometers south of Limerick, a hardcore city on the bank of the Shannon, Ireland's largest river, and about 4 kilometers north of the town of Bruff. In contrast to the harsh city, the small township of Loch Gur was quaint, appearing somewhat backwards. Within the actual boundary of the town was found 3 pubs, 1 store that doubled as a post office, 2 gas stations, one of which was outside the store that doubled as a post office, a golf club that contained a fancy restaurant and lounge, which actually brought the pub count up to 4, and the Loch Gur Interpretive Center and Museum. At one time there had been an art center and 5 B&Bs, but the art center had gone out of business due to low tourism, and now there were only 2 B&Bs left. There was a beauty parlor and a beer garden fashioned after those found in Germany. The owner had decided Ireland needed a beer garden after going to Germany on holiday and spending most of his time in one. Loch Gur also had a grade school and a high school, although the pilgrims would never see those 2 spots, no matter how many times they visited. The area was dotted with historical sites: stone circles, caves, mounds, standing stones, a giant's grave, several crosses, a chariot thoroughfare, several castles, and a real Bardic College center found in the only graveyard. Each of these sites held their own mythological significance. Loch Gur was not only the oldest and most important cultural center of Ireland, dating about 8,000 before Common Era, but held religious importance as well because the Irish gods had been known to visit or live in the area. Dermot and Grania had slept on the lake shore. Finn McCool and his Fianna had roved Knockadune, entering Tir na Nug through a hidden cave found on top, and a giant was known to once dwell there. Why, there are rumors of a loch monster even. Everyone listened eagerly to Cian tell about the area, only about a 15-minute drive away. The small island of Knockadune is the ancestral home of the Irish fairy goddess Onya, who married a mortal, one Earl of Desmond, he himself dabbling in black magic, after she turned herself into a swan and left him, which happened after he broke his promise to her, the promise being to never show surprise over anything their son Gerald did. Cian paused and gave a devilish grin. Naturally, the Earl shrieked when Gerald, their son, showing off at his 18th birthday party, effortlessly jumped over a huge bonfire, landing triumphantly on the other side, without so much as a little hair on his body singed. The Earl gasped at the impossible feat, as any good parent would. This small display of emotion cost him the loss of his wife, who was not only a goddess, but a fairy goddess, I might add, and his son, who was half mortal and half fairy himself. Cian clutched the back of the seat before him as the coach bounced. He looked over his shoulder at Joe. "You wanker, can't you see I'm standing?" "Is that what you're doing?" teased Joe, intentionally turning the wheel again to cause Cian to lose his balance and crash onto the seat next to Vivian. Cian grinned at Vivian. "Bullocks, the git," he swore good-naturedly before pulling himself back up. "If I don't break me feckin' neck because of our bad driver," he paused, turned to Joe and pointed 2 fingers at the man, playfully sending him the evil eye. Cian turned back to the expectant faces, each grinning with the fun being made before them, and continued his narration. "Where was I?" he asked. The Earl lost his wife and son," shouted Rose. Right, said Cian, continuing. There was no argument or remote possibility of a discussion over the matter. The Earl of Desmond broke his vow to Onya, plain and simple, and before his very eyes she shape-shifted, taken to the sky with their son, flopping his wings right behind her. The Earl of Desmond turned to magic to find a way to follow his family, but came across a vein of evil buried beneath the soil of the grange, which flowed under the foundation of his castle. Dark elves came to him, promising treasures in exchange for his soul. Faery Chronicle entry 1.999.1. What Cian did not tell or know to tell was that long ago the Earl had opened an ancient doorway that night, or that archaic powers arose when he had cried, "Drink me blood!" How they had circled him as he stood inside the stone circle one moonless night, and passing a blade across his arm, shook the flowing blood onto the land. He watched horrified as howlers broke free from the stones, sharp biting, teeth biting at the earth, red eyes of hell glowing stronger and brighter, and the Earl of Desmond had succeeded in awakening the forces of darkness. Anya's minions moaned from the lakeside, shape-shifting from air into physical forms. Anya's minions wailed in ululation, raising the hair on the backs of necks. And these banshees mourned the death of purity, mourned the death of the fairy mound. That night, the entrance into Tir na Nug was overshadowed by their Keenan and became concealed from the human world, and has not been found since. What became of the Earl of Desmond? Cian asked. Some say he died. Others say he lives still, a sorcerer of great power in league with the Dark Drawer. Oh, scary, moaned Shelby. That's right. This place has some powerful magic at work around it, warned Cian. On your right is the golf club where we'll be dining this evening, Joe reported. And two loud thuds shook the bus. Bullocks? Joe swore, maneuvering the bus to the side of the street. Vivian looked out the window to see a sign reading, "Welcome to Loch Gur," standing beside the bus. Joe slipped outside. Cian followed, stopping in the doorway, leaning out. All looked to Vivian for the answer. Having none, she raised her eyebrows and shrugged. From outside came Joe's monosyllable curses. The bus gently rocked. Cian pulled his head inside. Both back tires are flat, he reported. What? Vivian stood up. The back tires are flat? She repeated, not pausing for answer. She edged past Cian and stepped outside. A warm, gentle breeze wafted across the land. A wide, cloudless, lark-blue sky opened overhead. Joe lay under the bus, his two legs sticking out. He lifted his knees, followed by the sound of metal hitting metal. His hand curved, the tire moving over the black threads. Both feet suddenly grabbed at the gravelly road as he scooted out from underneath the bus. He sat there, a dumbfounded expression on his face, with furrowed brow, then glanced up at Vivian. I can't find the claws. Joe rose and wiped his hands on his pants. Cian stepped down from the coach. Several faces peered out the windows, worried expressions, disinterest, curiosity. Now, we can't have everyone standing on the side of the road, Joe began, scratching his head, eyes scanning the area and coming to rest on the elaborate glass-windowed building that sat gleaming in the middle of a bright green manicured lawn. He turned to Carla as she stepped down from the bus. We can't be too far from the B&B. He looked to her for confirmation. Carla shook her head and stood with one hand over her swollen belly. She looked tired. The fast pace of the pilgrimage showed around the edges of her drooping eyes that looked to Vivian. "That's right," Vivian confirmed when Carla didn't. "The B&B isn't much farther." She pointed down the two-lane blacktop. "Do you have the telephone number for it?" Joe asked. "Yes, in my briefcase," said Carla. "Then Carla and I will go over to the golf club and call them, and hopefully someone will be home, and hopefully they have a car and can come get them." Joe motioned with his thumb toward the bus, glancing up at the windows. "Good thinking, man," Kean piped in. "Vivian and I will stay here and keep the ranks entertained." His brown eyes met hers. "Great," Vivian replied, clamping a hand down on Joe's shoulder. "You think on your feet, Joe. I'm impressed." "Thanks," Joe responded, a leprechaun's grin crinkling his face. With briefcase in hand, Carla returned from the bus. She and Joe crossed the road and began their way toward the golf club. Vivian and Kean climbed back inside to a torrent of questions. In no time at all, Carla returned, reporting that Joe had stayed at the golf club to find an auto mechanic, that Mrs. McEwen was on her way, and within a matter of minutes, a small blue car pulled up. Change in scene. Okay. Mrs. McEwen, a handsome, slender woman with short strawberry blonde hair and blue eyes, got out, her height concealed inside the car. She was a flurry of apologies and pity, wanting badly to be of help, doing everything she could to get in Ken and Kean's way as they loaded a few suitcases into the trunk of her car. Ken squeezed into the back seat with Mark and Ellen, a frown prominently displayed on his face, a tight squeeze for two men and one woman, but he had been quick to stand and announce that he and Ellen wanted to be the first taken to the B&B, after Carla informed everyone that they'd have to go in groups of 3. Kean helped Carla into the front seat and closed the door. She would help Mrs. McEwen sort out the rooms, returning with her to pick up the next group. Vivian waved as the car pulled away, leaving a trail of dust in its wake. 2 flat tires and 40 minutes of sitting on the bus, keeping the pilgrims calm and letting Joe and Kean take care of the problems, suffocated Vivian. She sat looking at the welcome to Lochgar sign and attempted to analyze the situation. Maybe there was nothing to analyze, but the uncanny feeling that the flat tires was a warning not to go any farther pestered her. Mere coincidence? Vivian shook her head and looked across the road at the green golf course. No. Vivian didn't believe in coincidences, especially not here. Oh, I know. I shouldn't start laughing in the middle of a tense scene, but I didn't pronounce coincidences. I don't know if those of you listening actually heard that, but it made me laugh. Okay. No. Vivian didn't believe in coincidences, especially not here, not after what had transpired the last few times she brought a group to Lochgar. On one trip, the bus had been vandalized, a rare occurrence in these parts, according to the local authorities to whom the crime had been reported. Funny how the vandalism happened on the morning that they were supposed to depart the area. "Don't come back" was how they'd jokingly referred to the defacement. The green city sign with its yellow letters stood boldly, a truant flag of defiance. Welcome. Yeah, right. Wasn't it interesting how the bus was forced to a complete stop just as it crossed the township boundary line? Vivian swallowed hard, her mind paying no heed to the demand to stop remembering as a tranquil landscape sweltered on the backdrop of her mind. She helplessly remembered how the sky underwent a transformation from magenta and brilliant gold and azure to dusty blue, slate gray, charcoal as the sun slipped beneath the swelling land. She sat on the western shore of Nakadune. She sat on the Mermaid's Rock and fantasized that she was sitting in the same spot where the myths said that Munster fairy princess Onya had sat when the Earl of Desmond had come upon her lovely form and fell hopelessly in love with her. That day had been filled with such awe because the heavens spoke loudly to the intelligentsia of the planet. The great lord of space, Jupiter, was being bombarded with pieces of a comet, its discoverers named Levi Shoemaker. July 16th, 1994, had been a spiritually significant day for Vivian, and she was sitting in Ireland, on Onya's rock no less. The muted pastel sky held promise then. It had whispered something wonderful is about to happen, and the colors coalesced, shifted, and the youth's face of Jesus spread across the heavens, a kind face with sad eyes and a full mouth that curved into a gentle smile. Vivian had wept, loving Jesus, adoring him, admonishing herself for having turned her back on him. And through the tears she gazed upon the waters of Loch to watch as sparkling lights came to the surface of the water and formed into the image of a woman, the White Lady, shimmering, sparkling, and phosphorescent. Vivian shook her head. Hadn't she decided never to come back after that first visit, after she ran from the shore of the loch at twilight, fleeing, scared out of her wits, an ungodly screeching echoing through the woods, cries that rose from the belly of the ruined Borchier's castle, which sat obscured and menacingly at the north end of the marsh? Vivian shuddered as she recalled that sound, the sound of the horror, the sound that Sean McDowell, the local Shawnee of Loch Kerr, had called the cry of the banshee. That sound had pummeled her, raising the hair on her arms and back of neck, freezing her heart with pure terror, filling her with thoughts of doom. Am I trespassing? Replaying over and over through her mind as she lowered her head and ran, racing against the encroaching darkness, racing for the interior light she knew she would find once the car door opened. Vivian had been filled with such spirituality one hour and such utter fear the next. Later, this seemed to her to be the dichotomy of insanity, for surely to others all of that day's experience would be viewed as non-reality and most likely followed with a diagnosis detrimental to her freedom. That day Vivian experienced her first and only epiphany that the Celtic twilight was to be respected, that her view of the fairy had been foolishly innocent or ignorant, that they were to be unmentionable, that divinity was both love and cruelty, non-emotional, indifferent to human sentimentality. Welcome to Loch Gur. And Vivian wondered, should she expect any less an experience this visit? There we have it, the end of that sentence. That chapter. Ah, boy, what a crazy, crazy adventure. I'm here to tell you, and I know I've said it before, but my tales actually are written based on true life experiences. Yes, I'm insane. I hear you. I'm showing you the 5 companions without going into their lore. but these alcoves are aligned with each of the companions. You'll have to come and get a good glimpse if you really want to understand what I'm showing you. Come and play the game. Oh, yes. I haven't been playing recently. I've been playing Palia. I'm loving it. I've been playing with my son and daughter-in-law, and I'm just really immensely enjoying the massive multiplayer. I don't know, they told me it's like an MMMMO, blah, 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 blah. I can't remember what it is, but anyways. So, my friends, that's going to be it for this week. We are ending today at page 152, and we will continue next week at pretense. Oh, yeah, it's going to keep getting good. It still has some ways to be good, and then it'll climax, and then we'll move toward the ending of the book. But I'm so appreciative. Thank you, thank you, thank you for tuning in and watching. And for those of you who are enjoying the book, you can always hop on my website, visionaryartistpath.com, or go to Amazon and order a copy for yourself, Faery with Teeth by Kisma Reedling. And you could follow along with me as I read it. And that would be one way that you could show me your appreciation. Plus, hey, what can I say? You can get it as a Kindle book for just $3.80 right now. So take advantage of the cheap price. Okay. Until next week, have fun, stay safe, and I will see you again. Bye.